we get started, I was planning to just record myself doing this and put that up on our YouTube. Just wanted to make sure that's okay with everybody. It's like we're not going to pan the camera and point it at all y'all and put anybody on the spot. But I just wanted to check to make sure that's okay. So, good?
Yep.
Okay, okay. Drew and I were chatting about what to do here and what topic might be interesting, and thought about survival and related topics is something that might be appropriate, because there's a lot of nervousness right now. You know, it's not hard to have a conversation that ends up migrating toward the idea of folks being nervous about going through times of change. You know, I don't know what conversations y'all are having, but certainly in the ones I've had with, you know, friends and acquaintances, and just, you know, here, you know, kind of out there in the people talking in the community, right? It's not hard to come to that. And change is natural. You know, change is part of things. Societies are always changing. Circumstances are always changing. But one of the things that I think is different now is we've gone through a period of multiple generations where we've been trained to see needs, opportunities, and abundance in a way which is radically different from how our ancestors saw those things. Fair? Right? We see abundance as our ability to go to a grocery store. And we see needs in terms of how much coverage do I have on one of these little 6-inch boxes. And so, you know, after a couple generations of this, we've gotten, I think, a little bit out of balance in how we see these things. So we're going to be talking about survival and survival skills, and we're going to talk about, you know, botanical resources in our environment. We're going to talk about tools and their use. We're going to hit a bunch of different little topics today. And the word survival brings up many different things in people's minds. Some of them helpful, some of them related to very unhelpful reality TV shows. But where I want to go with this is reframing that thought process, rebalancing that thought process, and talking about survival in terms of what do we actually need as a human being to have a functional life and to go forward in life in any situation, including trying ones, you know? And you could think about this in any way that it makes sense to you. They all work, and they'll all be related to the sort of ideas that we're talking about. For some people, they think survival, and they think, what do I do if my car goes into the woods and it's a couple days till people find me? That is one scale to think about this at. Some people think about bug-out bags, and that is a perfectly legitimate scale to think about this stuff, right? Some people think, what if the grid goes down? That's a perfectly legitimate way to think about this. But I would encourage you to think about, if you're afraid of any of those situations, what is that telling you about your relationship with yourself and your community? Okay? And I mean the human community. I also mean the community of the natural things in this world that Creator has given us. Right? How are you placing yourself with respect to those things? And if you're fearful about the grid going down, how can we get past that fear by recognizing that some of our thoughts might be a little out of balance in terms of, in air quotes, what we need? So I would argue that the first survival skill that's absolutely essential is putting down addictions and unhelpful attachments. Okay, broadly defined. Now, when I say addiction, most people's minds immediately go to like some sort of vice addiction or substance addiction. And certainly that's true. If we go through a really hard period of human history and somebody is physically addicted to a substance, their chances of making it through that hard time just cratered, right? If you're being led around by, I have to get my next dose of this thing, you are not clear-headed in thinking about the situation, right? But even if you've never had any contact with those, anything which triggers the pleasure center of the brain can become addictive, including these, right? Unhelpful attachments, including, how fat is this? Unhealthy attachments, right? So the first thing I want to do is with that idea in mind, to identify the unhealthy attachments, we need to talk about what the human frame as a physical body needs to function productively, okay? And something which is not on that list has a high probability of being an unhealthy attachment that we need to let go of if we go, preferably before we go into hard times, because it's much easier to deal with this stuff when we don't actually have to. Do the work of the healing, do the work of rebalancing while things are still easy, right? While food is still underpriced relative to its current cost of production, and yes, I said it that way deliberately. While gas is still dramatically underpriced relative to its actual cost of production, and yes, I said it that way deliberately. I'll be honest, I have $10 a gallon gas on my bingo card for this year. So while we can still get everything we need, it just might cost a little bit more than we want. That's really not hard. Right? In the broad scheme of things, the broad scheme of what humans have done, let's have these conversations now. Right? So that we don't have to be facing them if something actually does go wrong. And something can go wrong globally, or something can go wrong with my refrigerator, and it's still the same problem. You know what I mean? So, with that in mind, what are the actual core human needs? If we're thinking about, and like my car ran off the road, what are the first things I need to think about, is a very useful way to frame this conversation. Okay? Catastrophic in the moment, plausible, not catastrophic globally, but something I could actually face, right? So something like that happens. What is the very first, most important survival priority? This is audience participation. What kills the most people the fastest in hard times, whether that's car going off the road or refugee situation? What's number one? What do you think?
Safety or injury.
Safety or injury. Bookmark that. That can go in multiple places on this list. Okay? If safety or injury, and I'm going to say medicine/hygiene for this. Okay? Where does medicine/hygiene fit in the list? If the injury involves blood squirting out of my wrist, it's top priority. If the injury is I broke a fingernail, bottom priority. So we're going to look at 4 others, and I'm going to kind of bracket them with safety and injury, because depending on the injury, it can fit multiple spots. Okay? So let's assume initially that there isn't an injury involved. Everybody's okay, whatever happened, whatever's going on, everybody's fundamentally okay. What do we do to keep everybody okay? What's the first consideration?
Water?
No.
Shelter?
Shelter, yes. Yes. And shelter, in this climate, we're thinking about water not getting on us, and we're thinking about temperature regulation. Okay? So what is the range of temperatures under which the human body is functional and the mind is working well enough to make intelligent decisions in a stressful situation? What's the core temperature range where you can keep functioning as a logical human being with productive thoughts?
You're talking body temperature or environment temperature?
Body temperature. Body temperature. Okay, if you have a fever, Where do you start to get fever dreams? Where do you start to go delirious if you have a fever?
104.
103, 104 depending on age. So that's the top, okay? What's the bottom? So you become just as delirious when you're experiencing hypothermia as hyperthermia. A lot of people don't understand that. Hypothermia is a disease of the mind. There have been many instances where people who were in the process of dying of exposure because it was too cold, stripped off their clothes and walked with no clothes on past a warm building because they no longer had the forethought to go in and help themselves. Okay? And the last stage of hypothermia, before you go unconscious, you have sensation, you have delirium, as I just said, and sensations of being hot. So you lose the logic and experience an artificial euphoria and sense of being overheated. What core temperature does that start to kick in?
96?
No. You gotta go down.
Okay.
Mid to low 80s. Mid to low 80s. At 80, you're unconscious. Mid to low 80s, you're delirious. The problem is, once you become delirious, you can still save yourself. You still have the physical ability to self-rescue, but you no longer have the cognitive capacity to self-rescue. Okay? So anything below the mid, below the mid 80s is getting really, really nasty. And once you get down around 80, it's kind of toast. So, what temperature of the environment is potentially dangerous given a really bad circumstance? 80. Right? We don't think of 80 as being cold. But if you've been swimming in a really cold stream and got chilled, and then jumped into a waterfall and got even more chilled and start to shiver when it's 80, you need a buddy to say, let's go to the car now. Right? Because even in warm conditions, given the right set of circumstances, you can get into a hypothermic situation. You can easily get chilled when you're sleeping, even in summer if you have a rainy, cold night. Okay? And you're out in the environment. Because the rain in the clouds is often a super chilled fluid. It picks up heat as it falls through the warmer areas of the atmosphere, but usually it's still darn cold when it touches your skin. Right? Your body temperature naturally drops when you're sleeping. So, if you're exposed at night in a rainstorm, even if the temperature, the daytime high is in the 80s, that's potentially a dangerous situation. And again, if your body temperature drops below the mid-80s, you're going to lose the cognitive capacity to self-rescue in the morning. Okay? So this is why, especially here in a cold climate, relatively cool, not cold, but relatively cool climate, cool temperate climate, shelter is number one, okay, of your expected priorities. Again, yes, we're going to put an asterisk in injury. That can supersede all of this depending on the injury. Okay? What's number two? What do you think's number two?
Water.
Still not water.
Fire.
Fire. Fire is not just comfort, right? Yes, fire also helps us deal with exposure. Fire is your ability to sterilize water. Fire is your ability to dry your clothes out if they got wet. Fire is your ability to prepare materials for your next fire. Fire is your ability to cook food and render it safe. Okay? Fire is critically important. Okay? We can have a fatality in a matter of minutes due to exposure if we don't get shelter and water right. Can you survive a few minutes thirsty? Yes. And again, all of this assumes there's no squirting blood in the equation. Right? If there's a bleed issue, we stop the bleed, nothing else matters. Then we go back to shelter. Okay? What's after fire? Everybody. Water! Now we get to water. Right? Now we get to water. How long can we survive without water?
3 days.
Wrong. That's the answer everybody trots out. You're not wrong for thinking that. That's what you've been told, but it's wrong. Huh? The answer is it depends. Right? If we're not overexerting, it's not crazy hot, and our body is able to undergo ketosis before we start to become dehydrated, you can easily last 4 or 5 days. Or even more. Okay? If it's crazy hot, burning sun, you're otherwise fasting, you crash into ketosis on day 1, you could be in trouble by day 2. Okay? It depends. Now, why have I said ketosis twice in this? Because when your body undergoes ketosis, first of all, it feels like you're dying. You're not, but it feels like it. Everything hurts. Ever have like a stomach bug, you lose all of your food, and you can't eat for a day or 2. And halfway through that process, you're just like, oh my gosh, every muscle in my body is killing me. I can't get comfortable in bed. I'm miserable. Everything hurts. That's ketosis. That's what you're going through when that happens. Okay? But on the backside of that, your body starts converting fats directly into energy. And a byproduct of that conversion is a production of surplus water directly in the bloodstream. Okay? So, this is why camels store fat in their humps. Because that fat is an energy reserve, it's also a water reserve. Okay? When your body takes sugar and converts it to fat, it consumes a water molecule for every 2 carbons that are put in the fat chain. And then when your body goes through beta oxidation and converts that fat back into ATP, or glucose, depending on what process and what organism we're talking about, that's a dehydration reaction, which is dehydrating, that dehydration is water coming off of the fat chain as a byproduct of cleaving it. So if you put water in when you make it, you get water out when you use it. So how much fat reserve you have also matters to how long you can go without water, as well as food. So a beanpole super skinny person who is dehydrated on day 1 or 2 before they go into ketosis cannot survive as long without water as somebody who has a little bit more reserves and it's cool enough that they can go through ketosis before dehydration starts to set in. But either way, we're talking about a function of days. Right? We're talking about a function of multiple days. Okay? So it's more complicated than just 3 days. There's more going on. Right? So again, I started out this little talk thinking about we need to rebalance our mindset. And we don't need as much as we think we do. You can go longer without water and you can go longer without food than you think so. Okay? Obviously there's limits, but still, the human frame can take a lot more than you think it can. Okay? What's number 4? Food. Food is number 4. How long can you survive without food?
Depends.
It depends!
25 minutes.
25 minutes? Okay, I said survive, not avoid being hangry. Right, it depends. Again, it depends on activity level. It depends on body shape. It depends on what's going on in the environment. Right, there's a lot of it depenses. But even for a very small, very skinny person, we're talking a function of weeks. Okay? So if you're thinking like a bug out bag or a my car crashed emergency bag, do you need food in it? No. You don't.
I might.
Okay? You don't. And I've seen, so yes, I have some issues. I have some big feelings about like where the prepper movement has gone. And one of them is I have seen so many of these people, like in person and online, they're like proud of their bug out bag. It's like 2/3 MREs. It's like, oh, totally, we have totally missed the boat. Right? We have totally missed the boat because we're putting 2/3 of our effort down here when we should be 2/3 of our effort up here. Right? Shelter is number one. If you're, like I said, you can think about this at multiple scales. If you are dealing with like a bug out bag or a car emergency prep bag, and that's the scale you're thinking about in this conversation, totally legitimate. 2/3 of your bag should be shelter related. Okay? Tent, well, we'll talk about options. A tent is an option. So I'll tell you, since it was brought up, if we're talking about a car prep bag, I will take a tent. If we're talking about a bug out bag, I won't. Because a tarp is much more versatile than a tent.
Just get an RV.
There you go. There you go. We have a bug out RV. Right, but again, also like the prepper movement, they always want to store mountains of this in a dragon horde. Right? And we're just... We have guys with mountains of this who can't start one of those without a half gallon of lighter fluid. It's upside down, it's out of balance, because we have lost the true understanding of what we actually need. And then, in brackets, because it depends, where this one falls depends on nature of everything else going on. First aid, hygiene. Okay? And those two are equally important. There's a reason everybody dies of dysentery in Oregon Trail. Right? Look at past wars. Look at Napoleon's army marching on Russia. He lost 2/3 to 3/4 of his army. What did he lose them to? Dysentery and exposure. Hygiene and shelter. Right? So if we're thinking about long term, we need to be thinking about, yes, we need a boo-boo kit and a stop the bleed kit. Absolutely. Right? That absolutely should be in any sort of bag that you're putting together. We also need to think about hygiene. How do you manage hygiene without being able to go to the gas station and get a bar soap? Okay? Because it will end it if you don't get this right. Bad news. Right? Real bad news. Okay? So let's start a shelter. Do we need a house to have livable shelter? No. And again, thinking about things we need and don't need. A house is a luxury. Right? We're not just talking about a cell phone as a luxury. A large house is a luxury. But we do need something to protect us from exposure. Right? So let's boil it down to brass tacks. I'm not saying everybody should go sell your house and live in a tarp for the rest of your life. Absolutely not. But we do need to understand what we actually need so that we can adapt to circumstances wisely. And I am saying that. Right? So if the danger in our climate is losing too much heat, because it's not hard to stay cool here in the Northeast. Right? Even in the hottest days that we get, on the hottest summer you can remember, you can go chill under a tree and you're going to be fine. Right? Or stick your toes in a lake and you're going to be fine. Right? It's not hard to temperature regulate on the high end. We have to watch the low end. So we're going to be thinking about heat loss. What are the ways that we lose heat?
Exposure.
Exposure.
Being cold and exposure, but what is exposure? Exposure to what?
Being out in the elements.
What are the elements?
Cold, snow.
Okay.
Rain.
Cold rain.
Okay, so you're laying down on a cold floor. How are you actually losing heat to the floor?
Your head and your...
Conduction.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Losing it to your head.
Induction, convection,
And?
evaporation.
Okay, so evaporative cooling and radiation. Conduction, convection, radiation. Assuming you're dry. If you're not dry, evaporative cooling. Okay? So let's just start with assuming you're dry. Conduction, convection, radiation. Which of those... Okay, I just said them in order. What? Which of those do you think is or do you lose heat by the fastest?
Conduction.
Conduction, yes. So what is conduction?
Direct contact.
Direct contact between what is... Let's take this back another step. What is heat? Or what is temperature?
Movement of atoms.
Movement of atoms, exactly. Right, so if my hand here has an atom that's doing this, and now this marker is an atom in the cold floor, right, and this atom in my hand starts whacking it, and it starts jiggling up. Well, now the energy that made this one jiggle up was deprived from the initial one. So now they're both moving at a speed slower than the original warm atom. That's conduction. Okay? Physical contact transferring momentum from the atoms and molecules in your body to the atoms and molecules of Earth when you're laying down on the ground. So when you're laying down on the cold ground, you're trying to warm up the whole Earth. That math don't math very goodly. You can't do it. You can't do it, right? So conduction is the fastest way to lose heat, assuming we're under dry circumstances. Okay? We need to insulate against conduction. This is why, if you're thinking about a bedroll, you need 3 times more insulation under you than above you. Right? So, if we're talking about this, these are a really nice bedroll. We use this for camping a lot. These foam pads. Okay? This one's also nice because it has a built-in ground cloth. So again, we're managing water and staying dry. Okay? What do you think the R value of these foam pads might be? Anybody know? Less than 6.
4, 3 to 4.
2. Most of these are 2. You can get 4s, but they're about a ½ inch thick, right? So the insulation value, you also have to remember you're squishing it. When you squish it, it loses some of its insulation capacity. Okay? Our value of 2 is good for early spring through fall in our climate. That's all you need for most of the camping season when you would choose to go camping. But inconvenient camping in the winter, you need to be thinking more about 6. Okay? So that would be 3 of these stacked on top of each other, if you're just going to go with this. You can get inflatable pads, but inflatable is, in my mind, something I'm not super comfortable with if I'm going to stake my life on it, because rocks happen. A wool blanket has an R value of 1. So if you have one of these pads and a wool blanket folded with 4 thicknesses, and you have that under you, now you have your R value of 6. Okay? What else has an R value of 6 that you can find in the woods? Leaves, needles, debris. So if you pull yourself a debris cushion, it's about 3 feet thick. You've got your R6. Okay? So if we're thinking about this in a, like my car ran off the road scenario, this on top of a couple of feet of thick of leaves that I pulled together is going to be a very warm bed. Right? What's the R value of a poly-filled sleeping bag that you're laying on? Goose egg. Okay? So again, 0. Right? Where you're laying on is doing nothing for you. It might have an R value of 2 or 3 above you, but it's got nothing under you, and we've already said what's under you is more important than what's on you, because conduction is the most important way that you lose heat. Okay? So this argues for... come on out. Poke these, honey. This argues for having a few of these. As I trip. Okay, so a couple of these, this isn't taking up more space than most sleeping bags. Yes, I know you can get those stuff into nothing, ultralight camping sleeping bags. But for most of your available at a local store sleeping bags, these 2 wool blankets have the same insulation, can do more things, and aren't any bigger. They are a little heavier. But that kind of comes down to suck it up buttercup territory. Sometimes we need to carry some stuff to have what we need. And again, as I already said, if we're thinking about a pack or if we're thinking about putting them in the trunk of our car, and I always have these in my car in winter. Always. Weight just doesn't matter. Size is of very little importance. But if we're thinking about a pack that we're putting together, remember I said, 2/3 of your weight and your volume you need to be thinking of allocating to shelter. Okay? So conduction. Next is convection. Does anybody know what convection is?
That's where I put my taquitos.
Oh. Gotcha. Well, okay, but a convection oven, what does a convection oven have in it that a different one doesn't?
Fan.
A fan. So what is convection? The movement of heat through currents of a fluid. Okay? The movement of heat through currents of a fluid. The fluid we exist in on a day-to-day basis is air. Okay? But if we're swimming, we also have convection in the water that's moving around us. Okay? But assuming we're dry, it's air. That's your second biggest loss of heat. Now, I said that you're trying to warm up the whole earth if you're laying on the cold ground with no insulation underneath your back. Why are we not trying to warm up the whole atmosphere when the air is still? And the answer is, conduction is most efficient when you have 2 things in contact with each other that are the same density. Conduction is weak when it goes from a high density material to a low density material like the air. So if we have a still air volume, there's very poor ability to conduct heat through that. Okay? If we have a moving air volume, we conduct a little heat poorly into the air which is right above our skin, but then it moves away and more air moves in, and then we conduct a little heat to that, and then it moves away, and then more moves in. Okay? So how do we block convection? You write her down while you're thinking. Huh? Clothes. Yes, absolutely. Your clothes are part of your shelter. And when I'm saying you need like an R2 in the summer or an R6 in the winter, I'm assuming that you're wearing weather-appropriate clothing, and that's going to the bedroll with you. Right? So the clothes you wear are a critical part of this. Okay? But also with the clothes you wear, remember what I said about like a polyfill sleeping bag having basically no meaningful insulation when you lay on it? A big fluffy coat has basically no insulation when you lay on it. Right? What does? Your old wool-rich jacket. Right? Wool retains that loft. It has enough oomph to it that it doesn't just squish out. And wool also retains a large percentage of its insulation capacity when it gets wet. So if you draw a little moisture up from the ground, your wool will still keep you warm, whereas most of your synthetic fills won't. Again, advantage wool. Okay? Yes, it's more expensive than modern synthetic materials, but there's no other material on earth that can do what wool can. Silk comes very close. Down does not. Down squishes. So when it's poofy around you, it's like if you want to carry a down comforter to sleep under, that's great for your under, but if you lay on it, you just squish it right down. Pun intended. So yes, wool can do things that no other material can. Okay? And then radiation.
Like fire,
Hmm?
like the sun, like a fire.
Yeah, this radiates heat. Okay? Radiates heat. So all objects lose heat by black body radiation. It's a term from physics. Okay? Black body radiation is just an object that's warm, spitting out electromagnetic waves, okay, in order to dissipate the heat energy it contains and cool down. Okay? Your old-fashioned filament light bulbs work by black body radiation. The wavelength that they emit directly measures the temperature of the object. So when you get a filament really, really hot, it glows. That's black body radiation happening. Now, fluorescent bulbs are different physics. Okay? So, we are warm. We are above absolute zero in temperature. Agree? Right? Hopefully we agree. Nobody's been sleeping in liquid helium, right? Okay, good. So we are warm. Even liquid helium has a black body signature, though. It's just really, really low and weak. So we glow like light bulbs in a certain wavelength. Anybody know what wavelength range we glow in? Infrared. So if you could see in infrared, you would see yourself glowing like a light bulb in those wavelengths. That's radiative heat loss. Okay? How do we control radiative heat loss? And it goes back to the other big way we control convection heat loss. Huh? Clothes and shelter, tent. Okay? This is where like space blankets come in. Space blanket, like Mylar, that has that aluminum inner layer, is really good at reflecting infrared radiation. Okay? And different materials reflect infrared to different degrees. White cloth reflects it relatively well. Aluminum reflects it really, really great. CO2 reflects it pretty well, which is why we talk about that in the atmosphere. You know, the ratio of these things and what is around us matters because it bounces that infrared energy back where we can reabsorb a percentage of it. But that is a fairly small loss relative to these other two. So we're going to control conduction based on our clothing and what we sleep on and under, right? Especially sleep on, right? And then our clothing and what we sleep under and what we sleep in, i.e. our tent or our tarp that's been turned into a tent, is creating a still air volume around us so that we still have conductive loss to the air in that still air volume, but we don't have convective loss between that air volume and the exterior. Okay? And while laying on a piece of canvas has basically zero R value in terms of blocking conduction to Earth, think about it. Remember what I said. Conduction works great when everything's the same density and very poorly when it isn't. So if you think about the air volume in your tent, even with just a very, very thin tent membrane, that's still dense. It's thin, but it's dense. So you have to have conduction from a low density to a high density to heat up the membrane around your tent, and then again from high density to low density to conduct it out to the surrounding air. Okay? So a piece of canvas has an effective R value of nothing if you're laying on it, but about an R value of 1 if it's blocking air volumes. Okay? Because of that density difference preventing the heat from escaping. So what we need for shelter is something to sleep on, in, and under. is a saying you'll hear in the survival school community a lot. You need something to sleep. It's not my original. On, in, and under. And then we have to manage water. Okay? Water getting on you and evaporation. That was mentioned by somebody. Okay? That outpaces all of these if it happens. Because now you have water, which is the same density as you because you are mostly water. So you have very good conductive contact between the water that's on you and the water that's in you, and hopefully staying in you because we got a good boo-boo kit going on. And when that evaporates, going from a liquid to a gas is an endothermic process, which means the liquid making that transition is physically absorbing heat energy out of its environment. If it's on your skin, you are the environment from which it's absorbing energy. It is literally the same physics that allows air conditioning units to work. A liquid gas transition. Okay? So now you have very good conductive contact with the water. It becomes a vapor. So you have conduction and convection happening simultaneously because now you have a fluid moving away from you. That's convection. And you have this other little bit of physics which makes it super, super efficient at getting heat away from your body. That's why water being wet can chill you so quickly. Okay? And this goes in, part of your shelter is what you take with you to sleep in. It's also where you set that shelter up. Right? Higher is drier. You don't want to set up a tent in a swamp because I don't care how good your materials are, eventually your body weight's going to sink deep enough into the swamp that you end up in a puddle. We don't want to be sleeping in puddles. That's how we get chilled and how we come out of the tent shivering and needing somebody else to build us a fire because we can't even make the match work. Right? Higher is drier, and that matters. Okay? So those are the ways that we need heat, that we lose heat, and that fixing those is what our shelter is going to be doing for us. Okay? The water thing is also why it's so important to have a ground cloth underneath you. Because most of the materials that we're going to be working with, unless you have a tent made entirely from like a gum cloth or painted cloth of some sort, they're going to be made to be breathable. There is no such thing as a material which is impervious to water but pervious to air. They're breathable because they have pores in them. Okay? So when the rain comes on this non-absorbing material, it will by surface tension run down across and miss the pores. Right? That's why they will keep you dry when they're over your head. They'll keep the rain off you. As soon as you lay on it, put your body weight on it, now you're forcing water into the pores. Okay? Because you're crushing it into the wet substrate. So you need something which is completely impervious. Or like a completely impervious section of tarp, fully waxed wax canvas, or some sort of painted cloth. Okay? And that doesn't have to be super complicated. I'll pass this around. This is a ground cloth that I made from a painter's tarp with some silicone caulk from the Dusher Hardware. And it's nice, it's soft, but if you try to blow through the fabric, the silicone caulk has penetrated the pores and you cannot do it. So even if you crush down, you won't get water coming up through the material. Okay? So you need a ground cloth to manage water. But, again, there's no such thing as a ground cloth that's so good that it'll keep you dry when you've sunk into a swamp and you're now in a puddle. So your first line of defense against getting wet while you're sleeping is where you set up the tent in the first place. Okay? So that's those considerations. Now, I mentioned tent versus tarp. Tents are awesome, but you break one pole, you're toast. I know nobody here has broken or lost a tent stake or tent pole, ever.
Never.
I'm sure,
Never.
right? And once you've broken a tent pole, your tent is literally nothing. It's literally trash, right? You really are not going to be able to improvise a way to set up a modern tent once you break those flexible poles, right? Whereas if you take a tarp and you know how to use your tarp as a tent, if you pull out a grommet or get a tear, there's ways to deal with that and you can still use it for your shelter. So as convenient and nice as tents are, I would only count on a tent being there for me if I'm still able to drive to a Wally World and replace it if I break the poles. If that is not a valid assumption, I want the tarp. It's not as nice. I can't fully seal it against insects coming in. It's not the home away from home that a nice big tent is. But if something goes wrong with part of it, I can turn it 90 degrees and still set it up in a different direction and I'm fine. And I can probably repair it, which is something that should always go in a bag. Anything you take, you want a sharpening kit and a repair kit that can handle it. Right? If you can't fix it, you don't have it. Also, 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So you need redundancy. And yes, that's my opinion on tents versus tarps. And you can be very, very simple with this. I have slept outside through some pretty powerful thunderstorms, just tacoed up, rolled in a tarp and a bedroll. Just, with the tarp right here on my face and the rain dropping on the tarp. I've done it, it works, I've stayed dry and warm, it's great. Okay? So you can absolutely be just fine. Remember I said, we don't need a house to be fine. We need shelter. And just a simple tarp to roll up in and a pad and a couple of blankets can be enough shelter to be just fine, even in pretty adverse conditions. Yeah.
I use a hammock.
Mm-hmm.
I use a hammock with a ground pad in a mummy bag with a tarp.
Yeah,
And you can outstand anything.
you can outstand anything, yeah. And that pad underneath you is blocking you from convection from below. The tarp above is blocking you from convection above. And you don't really have to worry about conduction that much because you're up above the ground. It absolutely works, right? And you could probably sleep through a blizzard in that and be just fine. You might want a third blanket, but
A mummy bag good to 0.
Yeah, yeah. So, and usually, again, when you're looking at the ratings on those kinds of bags, they're rating it assuming you're dressed appropriately for the weather before you slide into the mummy bag, right? So if you slide into the mummy bag wearing just a swimsuit, it's not good to 0. If you slide into the mummy bag wearing nice sweatpants and your hoodie's still on you, it's good to 0. Okay? However, that being said, another thing that I should absolutely say goes in the shelter category, an extra base layer. Because if you sweat while you're sleeping and get your base layer wet, now you're in all sorts of trouble when you get up and get cold in the morning. Okay? So, really cold climates worldwide, most indigenous tribes in really cold climates don't wear anything in their bed and just have a thicker bed so that they don't sweat through their base layers. Okay? Any sweating just goes on, the bedding material, and now they're awake, they're putting on their dry clothes, they built their fire so they could go dry off their bedding before they need to use it again. And they're not going out into the storm to build the fire with a wet base layer next to their body. So an extra base layer is absolutely a crucial thing to have in with those.
I have a liner in the bag that does that.
Yeah, oh yeah. There's lots of ways to deal with this. And notice I'm not selling anybody's brand. There are so many ways to get it right. There's so many ways to get it wrong too. But there's so many ways to get it right and they all work because they all work. So, let's go down to fire. There's lots of ways to start a fire. All I'm going to say here is if you're putting a kit together, the right way is whatever you can use. So, there's people who can't get their grill to go without a half a gallon of lighter fluid and a propane torch. that person has no business packing a ferro rod. It's just extra weight that they're not going to be able to do anything with, right? So skill is important here. If you can't get a fire with one match outside with foraged material 10 out of 10 times while it's drizzling, you don't need to be investing in new fire making equipment. You need to be working on your fire making skill. Okay? And if you're in that category, you would be much better off with a pocket full of extra lighters that you can actually do something with than a bunch of flint and steel kits that you don't know how to use. And if you can't get a one match fire in a drizzle, you're not going to get a flint and steel fire even under good conditions. Right? So the most important part of your fire kit is what you know. Right? All those things work. Ferro rods are great. Flint and steel kits are great. Hand drill, great. You can start a fire with a hand drill. It does work. Okay? But you don't need to be messing with the hand drill until you've mastered the flint and steel. You don't need to be working with the flint and steel until you've mastered the ferro rod. You don't need to be messing with the ferro rod until you can get that one match fire with foraged materials in a drizzle. So, if you want to build your fire kit, start with practice with what you have. When you master it, then add another level of difficulty and redundancy to it. Right? And again, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So I very much recommend, if you're putting together a kit, have an emergency fire kit that's absolutely like modern yuppie approved. Right? I mean a wax, like a wax pellet fire starter, a lighter, and a couple of cotton balls, and a couple of pieces of fat wood. Right? Something that anybody can get a fire going with for your emergency kit. And then a main kit in your main pouch. Right? When I designed, can you hand me one of the backpacks, beloved? When I designed these backpacks that I have with us today, right, they have a front pouch and a main pouch, and grommets on the side. The grommets on the side are for the bedroll. That all goes outside the pack, wrapped in a tarp so it stays dry. Your front pouch is a poncho, an emergency fire kit, and a tourniquet. The 3 things that you might die very quickly if you don't have. And then a main fire kit that you plan on using can go in the main pouch. Right? So you don't touch the emergency fire kit, ever. You plan to live your whole life and never use that emergency fire kit. You always use this one. Okay? But have that redundancy. And don't take anything you don't know how to use. It's just a waste of weight. It's not going to do anything for you anyway. Or you could use that space and that weight for much more productive items.
Snake bite kit.
Something. Yeah, although up here,
No.
yeah. Yeah, if you're down like where there's cottonmouths, absolutely. So that's like fire starting. And I'm just going to stop there with fire starting because I don't know where all of you are in that skill with fire keeping journey. But you all know where you are. Don't bring stuff you can't use. It's just a liability, you know.
Best thing I found starting is your flint and steel wool.
Flint and steel wool? Yeah, that'll work.
That's-
Steel's very flammable. Steel's a pyrophoric metal. Yep.
9-volt battery against steel wool is also very.
But just to give you another one, what did the Romans use? Anybody know?
Not a 9-volt battery.
No, they did not. But it's in the same category of chemistry. They used iron pyrite. You can use steel against iron pyrite or flint against iron pyrite, and it will spark because it's iron 2 rather than iron 3. It can still oxidize, and it's still a pyrophoric material when you shave off a small splitter. So there are pre-industrial equivalents to using steel wool. You know? Okay, then, so we have our fire kit. We have a way to start a fire. What's the other thing we really need if we're going to have a fire?
Wood,
Wood. How do we get the wood?
foraging for it.
How do we forage for wood?
An axe, a saw.
Something to cut it. We need cutlery. And this is where we get into one of Adam's hot takes. Bowie knives are stupid. There is nothing worse to put in a bug out bag than a big knife. Because big knives are terrible hatchets, and before anybody says, well, I want my knife for self-defense, no. The dumbest thing to take into a knife fight is a knife. Also, how do you know who won a knife fight? His death certificate says, in the ambulance. Right? Bad news. Plus, we're back out to first aid and hygiene. You get cut under really stressful situations, you're almost guaranteed infection. Can you deal with it? Right? So, no, if somebody attacks me with a Bowie knife, they're getting my stuff, I can reforge more. Not even going to go there. Right? And knives make horrible hatchets. There is a place for machetes under certain circumstances. But, like, large knives, you know, in that Bowie knife range, you know, like here, no, don't take them. Horrible, horrible idea. What do we want? Well, here, where temperature is the most important thing, processing wood is the most important thing, and a plurality of our population is not experienced in lumberjack games, take a saw with you. It will process wood very, very efficiently and very, very safely. Again, first aid, you want to keep the blood in the body. Okay? We don't want to be in an already stressful situation cutting off our fingers with hatchets. Okay? So you want one of these. Now, I recommend buying one of these that was made before 1980. Because these blades, and both of these I need to do a little work on. I got these, I think I paid like $4 for that and $2 for this one. Right, you can get these very inexpensively. But before, like 80s and pre-80s, the whole steel blade is tempered equally, so they can be sharpened. Modern hardware store saws, not 100% of them, but most of them. Look at the teeth. You'll see the metal is shiny, and the teeth all have a blue dot on the tip. Those are impulse hardened teeth. The teeth themselves are so hard they cannot be filed, therefore cannot be sharpened. The rest of the blade is not hardened, so it cannot hold an edge at all. A tool you can't maintain is a tool you don't have. There are modern companies and modern bespoke tool makers that are making good, fully tempered blades. But the big name brands that you see at most big box stores aren't those. So make sure that when you're getting a saw to take, you can get something that's going to be easy to maintain in the field. And this style of tooth is my favorite for that because these just touch up the tips with a chainsaw file. Very, very easy. Just to 2 strokes. It's faster than sharpening your chainsaw. And the same angle, the same tool. So you already have what you need to maintain these. Okay? And don't cut your finger off. Right. This one needs repair. I already said that. So you want it to have good tension, like a good friction folder, right? But if you get this style of blade, it's very easy to maintain. And for most folks who aren't accustomed to swinging axes on the regular, this is the safest tool to take to process firewood. It's also the lightest. Okay? I do also recommend a hatchet. And I'll set these here. We do want a hatchet for a primary cutting tool. Okay? And we want a small knife. Small knife. Your ideal knife for your body. It's going to be a little different from everybody. You want a pinch grip on the base of the handle, and you still want to be able to touch the tip. This length is your most versatile knife. It's small enough to be really good at detailed woodworking. Okay? It's large enough to field dress a moose if you need to. And we've already decided we're not getting into knife fights. So this is what you want. Longer than this, it gets easier to do butchering chores, but you sacrifice the usefulness in wood processing. Shorter than this, you get more detailed, better wood processing for like detailed carving. But if we're talking about a stressful situation, we're not doing art. Right? And being up to this size gives you a really good field skinning tool. But it's controllable enough that I can use my fingers and know exactly where that tip is all the time. So when I'm field dressing a deer, I'm not stabbing the bladder or stabbing the intestines and marinating the meat and stuff I don't want it marinated in. And when I'm skinning, that juncture where the skin meets the meat, I can feel that with the tip of my finger and just push with my finger. But now my finger has a sharp edge and will separate that skin from the sinew. So you can skin without slicing your hide, and then you can still use that for stuff. And again, if we're talking about a stressful situation, you just got an animal, you want to be able to use everything. Even if you just dry the hide and use it as an extra blanket or an extra thing to sleep on, as raw hide with fur on it. You want to get that off in good condition. So this is your proper size of knife. Now, this is the kit I made for Renee. Mine, I overshot the knife a little bit when I bought this blade, and I wanted to do that particular bit of artwork, so I just went with it. Will I pinch grip it? Not quite there. So this knife is too big for me. And I haven't totally decided whether I'm going to take a grinder wheel and just knock off a 1/4 inch and make it exactly what I want, or make another one. We'll see. But that is already too big for me. This is my gripe with a lot of modern tools again. Like a lot of modern tools are designed for people who don't know what they're actually looking for in a tool. And it's a big problem. Okay? But most modern tools start at like 3.5 or 4 inches, and that's too big. Way too big for your primary knife. The hatchets themselves, I brought 4 very different hatchets with 4 very different use priorities, even though on the surface they're going to look fairly similar. And you can come up and look at these in more detail when we are finished. This is mine, okay? And this is a 1.6 pound head. Never go heavier than that, because it's pushing 2 pounds. The whole kit is a little over 2 pounds. That's a lot to have on your belt, okay? But this is a large head. The middle and lower edge of the head is still seated over the haft. That's important. When you have blades with real flared out beards, and you put pressure here, it wants to rock them up off of the hafting. Okay? They have a purpose, but this is a diminished felling axe. It's a small felling axe, a belt axe. This is also, if you look at the blade, you can see how thin it is. This is to penetrate deep when you're cross-cutting, to cut something down. That's its purpose. It's got the weight to penetrate deep. It's got the blade profile this way to penetrate deep. And there's only a little bit below the haft, and the haft is really thick, so it's not going to rock off anyway, even if I only hit here. Okay? This is a diminished felling axe. This is a diminished splitting axe. See how it's symmetrical. It's not designed for carving. And if you look at the blade, it's almost a straight edge going down here. This is a wedge. This is for splitting. If you try to take this hatchet and cut something down, you're going to hate life. Right? If you take that one and try to do splitting, you can, but you're going to get it stuck a lot. This is purposefully a diminished splitting axe. Okay? Now Renee's, this is called a Hudson Bay pattern. Okay? It does have a beard. So if you go using this is not a diminished felling axe. This is a detail tool. This is intended to be held this way and used for paring, for butchering, for carving, for making feather sticks, for detail work, instead of having a larger knife along. So instead of being a diminished felling axe, this is more of a glorified knife. Okay? And if you feel these halves, you put your hand here, you'll see why I carved this handle the way I did. Because right there, this is the primary grip of this tool for careful work. Okay? Because I'm figuring on having a backpack that's got a few extra tools in it, whereas I'm not going to put that weight in hers. Okay? It can still chop down a small branch, and it can still split relatively well, as long as you're careful to do all of that in the top half of the blade. But if you're going to cut down like 3 or 4 inch diameter things and just wail on it from the back, you're going to pop the head off. It's not intended for that. Okay? So that's the second one, the third one. And then the fourth one is this little guy, which is only about 9/10 of a pound total package. Okay? It's cute. It's really cute. And its purpose is to be there just in case you need it when you don't actually intend to use it. Okay? So if you have a kit, if you're putting a kit together for a season or a location where you don't really intend to be building large fires on a regular basis, but you want the hammer pull ability for setting up your tent, and you want a hatchet just in case you lose your other tools and you need it for a backup, it's a very lightweight backup. But stuff this small is not great for a primary tool that you're intending to depend on. Okay? However, backup to a backup is a very legitimate use category that deserves to be filled in some circumstances. Okay? But any lighter than this is just kind of silly. This is the really well, okay, let me back up once. There are historical hatchets lighter than this, but they're on long handles and they're fighting tools. War axes are not heavy, right? But again, we're not like planning to fight with people. We're planning to build campfires, so. Right? So, these little guys are great for an extra item in an otherwise well-equipped pack. But that's their role. They're not a primary tool. You want at least a 1 pound, like 1 to 1.2 pound head for a small-bodied person, and more like a 0.4 to 0.5 pound head for a large-bodied person. My 0.6 pound head, only if you're really experienced and know why you want that extra 1/10 of a pound. Okay? Because that will fatigue you if you're not used to using those sorts of tools on the regular. And a tool that fatigues you becomes a dangerous tool. Right? My advice on getting hatchets is you want to get a couple and see what works for your body. It's not that expensive to buy a couple at a variety of weight ranges at some yard sales or something. And go and play with them. See what works and what fatigues you. If you have an underweight hatchet, you're going to get frustrated because you're not doing the work you expect it to do. You're going to overpower the tool and it becomes dangerous. If you get one that's too heavy, it fatigues you, overpowers you, and becomes dangerous. So you want the right weight for you, and just like the right knife length is different from everybody's, depends on the length of your pointer finger, the right weight of a head depends on your body type and fitness level. Okay? And you don't need to answer that to me, but you need to answer it very honestly to yourself. So, those are those tools. And then lastly, there is a role for a machete. Okay? Right? There is a role for a machete. But it's not processing firewood. Right? For processing firewood, this is a terrible hatchet. Can I cut stuff down? Small stuff. The machete comes in warmer climates where I'm not as worried about these three. Where a fire is to boil water and cook food, not to not die in the next half hour. Okay? So machete is for a warmer climate situation. A machete is also for butchering. So if I'm not really expecting to be doing a whole lot of wood foraging, but I am expecting to go on a moose hunt, and I want a tool that can do some wood foraging, but can also help me butcher the moose, this is a very good butcher knife. In fact, the reason this has the shape it is it's a Filipino blade style, that's primary, it has two primary uses. One is making things out of bamboo, harvesting and using bamboo for weavings and whatnot, and hunting and butchering pigs. So this blade is designed to do both of those chores. And even though it looks like, some people are like, whoa, right, it looks kind of big and scary, but it's a farm tool, right? So it's also not finished yet, and this edge is not really sharp at this moment. Well, it's tuna can lid sharp. It's not like, that's very sharp. So I still want to cut myself on it. But something like this weighs as much as a hatchet, but it's not a tool for your fire. It's your tool for if you're planning to hunt and you want better than just a butcher knife, or if part of your strategy for whatever you're doing is going to be cutting a lot of vines, weaving, processing bamboo, things like that. Then there's a place for a machete. Now, this is why I say, if this is the primary tool you expect to use, but you want a hatchet just in case, that's where this combination comes in, right? But you still want a small real hatchet, even if you have something like that, okay? So that's fire. What are we doing with water? What are our considerations with water? What do we want with us to make sure we can handle and manage water?
Canteen.
Something to carry water in. What else do we need?
Something to boil it.
Something to boil water in. Possibly something to filter water in. Now, again, time frame matters. If we're talking about a car that ran off the road and we're waiting a day or two till somebody finds us, filtering's great. But all filters have a maximum number of uses and then they're useless. So we still need something to boil in. We need a stainless steel container that we can harvest water and boil water in. Okay? If we want a filter, that's an extra redundant tool that we don't intend to use. Right? The filter is in the same category as a midget hatchet. Okay? We don't intend that to be our only thing. A pot, a small stainless steel pot, like a 10 or 12 cup pot, or not 10 or 12 cup, like a 10 or 12 ounce pot, that we could boil a canteen full of water in. We can use that for 3 or 4 generations of human lives, and it will keep boiling water. Most filters are good for like 100 uses, or whatever they're labeled at. And then they're plastic trash that now we're in the woods and we don't want to litter, but is taking up room in our pack. Okay? So it's not that they don't have a place. They absolutely have a place. And if you need to move across the landscape quickly and don't have time to build a fire, filter's great. If we're making a car kit that we intend to use for a couple days and then get rid of everything and replace it, filter's great. If we want something that's going to last forever, we need a boiling pot. Okay? And the boiling pot can be the canteen if you get one of like the old stainless steel military canteens. Those can be the same item. But it's still nice to have something we can cook food on. So advantage still goes to pot. So containers there are important. Okay?
Stir up.
Emergency fire kit.
And heat the water.
So, and heat the water again, but now we're talking about like a planned camping or a 2-day till rescue car kit. Sterno fits. But if we're not in those, we still need lots of ignition capacity to build fire for a long time. Okay. I was going to say, also we need cordage and rope to be setting up our shelters. Right, we need that up here too. Kind of forgot to say that one. So yeah, that's water. What's one more thing that we need with respect to water? Do we want to drink water out of that pond? No. Stagnant, mucky water is a good way to get in the Oregon Trail Club, right? We want fast-running water, preferably right out of a spring. It's very common to find springs that are running, but kind of come up underground and percolate through the ground at the top. So you can't dip into them. What do we need? Yes! We need something like this, right? Some item. It could be this. This was handy to grab when I was on my way here. It could be a garden trowel, right? We want a garden trowel for digging cat holes when we need to use the bathroom anyway, right? So something that we can do a little bit of excavation work to get at that water. Now, if we don't have this and we have a hatchet, we can manufacture a digging stick, right? We can forage some of these things. But we need to be thinking about how are we going to dig to a spring if we need to dig to a spring. Here, yeah, just switch it out. Here in our important for water. And notice I'm talking a lot about tools in very generic ways. Oh, you need help with that?
Yeah, I got it.
You got in? Okay. Not so much brands. There's a bajillion different ways to solve each of these. But I'm talking a lot more about tools to do things and gain the materials we need than a whole bunch of stuff I'm storing. Right? Because I want one tool that will be productive for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks if I need it to be. And keep me going rather than 8 MREs and no decent bedroll. Which I might die of exposure in the first night. And not even eat my way through the MREs, so the tools and these things are more important than just a whole bunch of stored water or a whole bunch of stored food. And then food. What are our considerations with food?
High protein,
So you're bringing some snacks with you,
always.
okay? Yes, high protein is good. Nutrient dense. What's the classic high protein, nutrient dense food of North
jerky.
America?
Beef jerky.
No, but you're made from beef jerky.
Pemmican?
Pemmican and wasna. Yeah.
God bless you.
Well, wasna is a form of pemmican made with parched corn instead of meat. So it's something, grease is a binder, some fat is a binder, and dried berries. If the something is ground dried meat, it's pemmican. If the something is ground parched corn, it's wasna. Okay? And both are good. Both are very energy dense things to take a little bit of. And dried food is good, completely dry, dehydrated stuff is good too. Do we want that in a bug out bag?
I don't want that in any of my bags.
No, you don't! Another hot
I didn't
take.
get this big by eating wasna or whatever it is.
Another hot take.
Jerky and some venison jerky and all that other stuff.
Gotcha. Another hot take. Never put food in your main bag because of bears.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're taking food with you, have it in a separate knapsack that you can store outside of your shelter. So we can have all of our tools with us in the shelter, and we have a smaller knapsack that's over the shoulder or tied to the outside of the bag that we can hang in a tree somewhere else. Also, that auxiliary bag gives us the capacity to have an extra container to go foraging, collect things, and put them in as we forage food from the landscape. Traditional cultures, hunter-gatherer cultures, how do you think let me rephrase that. What do you think are the priorities in terms of importance to total calorie count? Plants, and land animals, and fish. How would you rank those three? What do you think's top?
Plants.
Plants. What's next?
Fish.
Fish. Shellfish can rival plants in some cultures. because they're just there to be picked up. And then red meat is occasional. It's an occasional condiment to accommodate your salad. Okay? Those are the real priorities in most actual hunter-gatherer situations. There are a few exceptions, like the Shetland Islands. Ocean birds become very, very important because they're just nesting for half the year right there on the roof, right? So they're just like, hi bird, and welcome to dinner. A lot of coastal areas, shellfish become important. Great Plains, the bison was of extra importance. But those are exceptions that prove the rule. They're not the rule, right? Also, another fun fact, when anthropologists have studied the last remaining hunter-gatherer cultures in South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, how many hours a day do they spend working toward the home economy? What'd you guess? 4 to 6. 4 to 6 hours a day foraging for their food, building their homes, making their clothing, all of it together. 4 to 6 hours a day. That's what it actually takes to fill actual human needs. And that number should make you angry. Because the rest of the time that we waste slaving away to systems that we don't like is time that's been engineered into our thinking because our thinking is out of balance with what we want and what we actually need. The difference between 4 hours a day that we enjoy with camaraderie in our community and 8 hours a day that we loathe is this extra stuff that we've been told we need but we don't need. So again, reframing things, rebalance things. So foraging comes down to knowing your local flora, and we're going to go out for a plant walk. So I'm just going to drop that one now and save it for when we go on the plant walk, okay? But if we think about meat acquisition in the field, another hot take, meat, right? I've already said, like, a big knife is one of the most useless things you can take. So is a gun. Another one of the most useless things you can take. It's heavy, there's limited ammunition, only good for one thing, no versatility, easy to destroy. Unless your purpose is to go on a hunting trip, then sure, obviously. Or if you're going moose hunting, you're going to take at least an odd 6, right? But if this is more like a car wreck situation, bug out bag situation, something like that, where we're thinking, don't take a gun. It's just not good for much. And the effort you exert in big game hunting is mostly wasted effort. There's 2 ways to get protein that make sense. One is a small fishing kit with trot lines. So you have a string, you have a sinker on the end, 6 to 10 hooks in the middle, every hook has a worm on it, you make camp at night, you throw it into the lake, you tie it to a bush, you come back in the morning and see if you caught anything. You did or you didn't, very little energy invested. That is an efficient way to supply meat on a trail. And you can either use it or not. It takes, at a certain campsite, depending on where you camped, takes up very little space, very little weight, very good thing to have. That makes sense. The other thing that makes sense are these guys. Anybody know what these are? I keep tripping on that chair. Conibears. What do? They trap animals. So I have 3 sizes, a 110, a 150, and a 159. They're relatively lightweight, don't take up that much space. Okay? And they will catch meat for you. So the 159 is more like, raccoon-sized critters and rabbits. The 110 is more like muskrat and squirrel territory on the other end of the spectrum. And they are, of course, tangled. This looks like my fishing tackle box.
You're not wrong. It's Christmas lights.
There it is. Christmas lights.
Yeah.
There we go. Now, while I get these untangled, in Pennsylvania it is highly illegal to set these on land. I'm not advocating that. Yes, you can set them in water
Okay.
for muskrat and get bigger ones for beaver. But it's highly illegal to set them on land because they will dispatch anything which gets in the trap. Okay? So what these are, for those who haven't seen them, is this is the latch, this is the trigger. We depress the spring. We be very careful because these will break fingers. And then you hook the latch. It's safe for this side. This would not be safe with a 330, but this is safe with a 110. Okay? We set them there. Okay? Now anything which goes through here wiggles the trigger and gets caught just like in a mousetrap.
Yeah.
Okay? And again, this is good for squirrel, mink, and muskrat-sized critters. Anything like raccoon-sized or bigger is going to knock it out of the way.
All right.
If it gets its nose in, it'll work. Same with the cat. If the cat gets its nose in, it's not here anymore. That's why they're illegal to set on land.
Right.
Right? But if we're talking about staying alive for a few days because our car ran off the road, and I see a rabbit trail going in front of where the car ran off the road.
Probably scared it away when the car ran off the road.
Well, till the next evening. Till the next evening, right? So, and there are states where they're legal to set on land. Pennsylvania just isn't one of them.
What do you bait with?
Blind sets. You put it in the trail.
Oh.
You put it in the trail and it runs through.
Get some of that wasna on there.
Yeah. You can.
Take out your bag, get it on the track.
You can bait them, like if you find if you're going for muskrats and you find a calamus patch, that's a really good natural plant that's a muskrat bait. Like you could put a little bit of calamus root right on the trigger and it'll go after it. You can put a carrot on them for rabbits. Again, it's like
And the other chain's tied to a tree or something.
stake to the ground.
See, there's the protein I was talking about. I'm kidding.
The stake, yes. I got some nice rebar in the car if you want to chew on it.
That's right.
Yeah, so this is something that you can take, like I was saying, like filter versus boiling pot, consumable versus non-consumable materials. This is a non-consumable source of protein that will last for multiple generations if used lightly and taken care of. I mean, obviously everything wears out over time, but I've got a bunch of these that were probably made in like the 50s and 60s that I took out to trap mink and muskrat this year that are still running, even being heavily used. So they will last. Now, these guys, you got your finger in this, you're not using your hand for the rest of the day.
Well, that's the consumable protein part.
Yeah, there you go. This one, the 159, this is better for like rabbit-sized game. It's got a bigger target. That'll work on a rabbit if it gets its head in it. This is a slightly bigger target. Okay? And once you get out into the Midwest and the more rural states, you can use them on land. You have to check individual. Context matters, right? Like look at what your game laws are in a certain area, and I'm talking to the camera here too, because that's not going to go on YouTube. Right here in Pennsylvania, just don't, as long as it's not like necessary to keep you alive. In which case, I'll take the fine. Thank you. I kept my family alive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it's like a $500 fine. If I have to pay a $500 fine to keep my family alive, I'll get out the money. You know what I mean? It's a thing. But in normal times, no, don't. Not here. But like something like this is a bigger target for the rabbit to get into, for a raccoon to get into, for a possum to get into, for those other larger critters. So just like when we're also setting a trot line is illegal in Pennsylvania, just for the record. It's legal in the most southern states. Trot lining for catfish is legal in most southern states and in most of the Midwest, but Pennsylvania has some of the most restrictive wildlife laws in the nation. So in this particular context, you can't do that on a daily basis. But if you visit states where it is legal, you can go and practice, and practice is important. You don't want to depend on a skill you haven't practiced. But for the most part, the bait question, you're finding a trail, setting it in the trail, so when the next critter comes through that trail, it is still there in the morning, so you can eat it for breakfast. And that comes down to being a good tracker, right? So your ability to hunt and fish starts with your ability to be a good tracker, and then continues with your ability to use the equipment, and then continues with your ability to understand how the animal's going to react to a disturbance in its environment. So all of those skills lead up to being able to use this. If you don't have all of those skills, leave these home. You know, this one will break a finger. This one absolutely will break a finger. And the best way to break a finger is to get it caught here in the moving joint. That's worse than getting it caught in the jaws. Yeah. Getting caught in the jaws, you have a 50-50 chance of breaking the finger. Get caught here in the moving joint, you're almost certainly broke a finger. So again, that makes first aid more important. Now, we've kind of hit on first aid a little bit just as we've gone along. We want a boo-boo kit, we want a way to stop bleeding. Okay? I do want to hit hygiene. Bar soap absolutely should be in a bag. Right? We need to manage hygiene. Everybody dies of cholera and dysentery in Oregon Trail for a reason. That's a real thing. Okay? We take hygiene for granted. But before running water and showers, people died of bad hygiene all the time. Okay? And we're talking here primarily about food poisoning. Okay? Most food poisoning comes from dirty fingers. Right? And most food poisoning, most bacteria which carry food poisoning are transmitted by the fecal-oral route of infection. Which means somebody went potty, didn't wash their fingers, and ate a sandwich. And then die of going to the potty so much that they completely run out of water in their system. There's a point at which you're losing so much water to the dysentery that you cannot consume water fast enough to keep your blood volume high enough to allow your heart to beat. Okay? And that is the most common way that people die in refugee situations to this day. Right? Fecal-oral bacteria, food poisoning. So we need to be able to take care of those aspects of hygiene. Another really big one, and I'm just going to be very generic, we're talking about intimate interactions and infections. Okay? Very bad. Yeast infections can quickly turn into UTIs, and bladder infections can quickly turn into kidney failure. Okay? If you don't have antibiotics available and good hygiene. So that whole area of human interaction needs to be highly modified in how you think about it if we're talking about a long-term refugee situation of any sort, okay, or long-term disaster. If you can't keep your body clean, keep your body to yourself. Right? It's just that simple. Also, you do not want to be pregnancy while you're already in ketosis. That's called eclampsia. And it's not going to end well for anybody. Right? So, all of those things need to be considered, and those are the things that nobody talks about. Right? All of your reality show and Hollywood scale disaster scenario, people are trying not to die in a gunfight. But that's not how you're going to go out. You're not going to go out in a blaze of glory. You're going to go out because you pooped yourself to death. That's the realistic one. So, how do we handle cleanliness and disinfection if we don't have ready access to soap? And there are a couple of ways that you should know. One is clean yourself by swimming. Second, steam baths. Remember I said that tarps can be used for a lot more than tents, but even though they can be used as a tent and a lot more. If you have a tarp and you have some willow branches you can stretch over to make a little big basket enough to crawl into, and you have a fire that you can eat some rocks in, you can take a steam bath. And taking a steam bath is every bit as good as taking a shower. The first one you take, you're going to smell disgusting. Go dip off in water if you can, take another one. The water that comes out of your skin will be as clean and sweet smelling as any spring water. You get that first push of toxins out of your system, and then it just smells like clean water. And taking a daily steam bath is every bit as good as taking a daily shower in terms of keeping your body hygienic. Okay? The second way. Third way is third thing to consider is disinfecting materials and surfaces. One goes back to fire and water boiling. So if we have heavily soiled clothes that we need to sterilize, we can just boil them and kill things with heat. Okay? Then we can kill things with natural chemicals. This is where we start getting into what plants can do for us. Tannic acid. Tannic acid is a very, very common way that plants defend themselves against disease. It is a large suite of chemicals. None of them are any good taken internally. But what they do is they bind protein. This is why tannic acid is good for tanning leather, because it binds to the protein molecules and changes their nature. Well, bacteria cells and viruses interact with their host in the environment through proteins in the cell membrane. So if we go and we expose them to tannic acid and completely coat all of those proteins and tan the living daylights out of the bacteria, it can't be a bacteria anymore. You've literally tanned the bacteria. So high tannic acid teas can be very good for disinfecting surfaces. Most of them are also reasonably good at dyeing colors, right? All the canvas I have with me was dyed with tannic acid-based dyes. But so what? Your shirt changed colors, it's clean, you're healthy, you didn't go out Oregon Trail style. We can deal with this. Buy a new shirt if you don't like the brown color. But it's probably fine. So we can disinfect surfaces with tannic acid. Next, we can disinfect surfaces with pH change. So for a bacteria to be, our cells are pretty close to neutral in pH. Any given organism can only operate in a fairly specific range of pHs. So to infect our bodies, they have to operate in neutral pH. Things that operate neutral pH are very bad at operating in strong acid or base conditions. Okay? So we can disinfect things with vinegar just because of the acidity. Which is actually the main reason that all old farms had apple orchards. It wasn't for the apple pies, it was for the apple cider vinegar, because that was the disinfectant for everything, as well as pickling. That's why pickling works, because the bacteria which make us sick can't live in vinegar. So you pickle something in vinegar, you get bacteria growing in it that can live in vinegar, but we don't care about them, they're fine. They can't make us sick because they can't operate in a neutral pH. The other readily available material that we can radically change pH in the opposite direction to basic is wood ashes and hydrated lime. Either of the two. So if we have water, we boil some wood ashes in it, we now have a disinfecting solution that we can use on surfaces or on clothing again. Okay. Also, the tannic acid, really good for a skin wash. Really good for wound care. Really good for boiling boiling bandages in, because you have the extra disinfectant potential of that tannic acid right in there. So yeah, we have brown bandages, but you know what? We'll live with that. Okay. So those things are all ways to clean. And the last one I want to mention is clay. Clay, most clays are as good at absorbing toxins as activated charcoal is. They're also very good at absorbing oils. So what soap actually does is wash the oil off of your skin, and with it, dirt that became oily from having contact with your skin. Right, so if you just rinse your hands in water, you get everything which has not become oily off. When you add soap, you now also get all of the oils off and the dirt that they contain. So if you really are badly contaminated, like let's say your buddy didn't listen to my advice and got dysentery, and you're helping them heal, and now you have hands that really need a good wash, clay. The clay on the hands, let it dry, it will absorb the oils, wash in tannic acid. And you can clean that way. Okay, and you can clean very effectively that way. Last one, more important if you have like a large, if we're talking about a home or a hut, cabin, something like that. But also relevant to materials and clothing again is smoke. Okay? So for two reasons. One, all smoke is enriched in formaldehyde, formic acid, and acetic acid. All of which bacteria do not like. This is why in brain tanning, what actually tans the leather is the formaldehyde in the smoke. Okay? But formaldehyde kills the ever-loving bejabbers out of most bacteria and viruses. So just smoking things will help disinfect. And then a lot of plants out there that are used for smudging by cultures worldwide also have volatile oils and essential oils in them that are disinfectant in their own right. So there have been a number of studies done on Asian smudging mixtures with, mugwort, wormwood, yomogi, and those sorts of plants that they've studied, like residual flu, coronavirus, cold, norovirus, like those sorts of virus loads on the walls of a building before and after smudging. And after smudging, the viral load of the environment is reduced by more than 90%. Okay? So we can use smoke pots to disinfect spaces and maintain hygiene. Right? And while that hygiene isn't up here on must deal with this in the next hour or there's problems, once we go past the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 day mark, that hygiene becomes very, very important, right, to maintaining health long term. So that's initial thoughts and kind of like a framework. These are the things that are the real human needs. Okay? If it's not on this list, it's a want. Really, if it's not on this list, it's a want, not an absolute need. And when we know that, we can do a much better job of just seeing how abundant our environment is in providing for everything on this list. And that abundance is why, even in really poor territory, like the Gungsan in Africa are still in the 6-hour-a-day average workday, even though they're in one of the roughest environments on Earth. Because even that hyper-arid environment provides easily for this. When we know that, we can really see the abundance around us much more vividly. And that's why I also wanted to do a plant walk here after this little talk, so we can practice seeing some of that abundance around us more vividly. So, do we all want to get a drink of water and eat a donut and use the bathroom and reconvene in 10 minutes, and then we'll go just stroll here around the edge of the pond? Okay.